Melissa. The next tech talk will be two of the devs presenting their personal projects, and then the final one will be on the actual grad projects that we did as teams. So just a little bit of context around the personal projects. So every single one of the grads this year was given a personal project to work on, the purpose of which was to apply what was learned through the workshops that they were a part of. So many of you would have been a part of the workshop process this year. I think we had 43 or 44 different rabbits as part of the workshop process. And these personal projects were an opportunity for them to apply what they had learned through those. I tried to pick topics that were unfamiliar to all of them to give them a little bit of a challenge. So Melissa is going to be doing what is essentially a sleep application. So specifically her brief was cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia application to help you sleep better and have better sleep habits in general. And Lisa Marie's initial brief was a Tinder app for dogs. It kind of morphed a little bit as user research went into it, but I'll let her present that to you. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Melissa, who's going to take you through a sleep app. Over to you, Mel.
Okay, cool. I thought, let me just introduce myself briefly. I'm Melissa, obviously one of the grads. Yeah, this was a bit of a challenging thing to do, not having any experience in UX and UI, but yeah, super cool, super fun to work with, and to use Figma for the first time. It was super dope, so cool. So let me share my screen.
I'm gonna have to make you the host. Hold on a second.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
Hey, allow? How do you do that?
You go to at the bottom to the share screen option, and then you tap on the little arrow. It says allow multiple.
I don't know what you are talking about. Nope. It is sometimes, man. I really wish I knew how Zoom worked. That would make everything very nice. Multiple participants can share at a time.
That one?
All right.
Yeah, there. She should be able to share now.
Perfect. Can you give it a go?
Yes. Okay, cool. Just open it. What is it? Cool? Okay, cool. So I've got the sleeping app. So basically I named it Counting Sheep. So Counting Sheep is a mobile sleeping application designed for an Android device. This application has 4 features, where one, you'll be able to track your sleeping patterns. You'll be able to track monthly and weekly sleeping patterns and download them. Users can also select daily tags of possible sleep factors that can influence their sleep, as well as create a bit of a custom sleep radio, and also where you can add meditations, etc., and also had a little bit of a look at adding some tips and tricks. But before I get into explaining my app in more detail, I would like to explain to you briefly how I got to the idea and let's say essentially an end product. So I went through the design thinking process to structure my research, and I used it for a massive approach throughout my whole design. The design thinking process is a non-linear and a bit more of an iterative process that I used to help me understand the potential users, challenge my assumptions, and redefine my research and create innovative solutions to kind of test out my prototype. So basically the problem within the sleeping app is sleep deprivation. So when one is sleep deprived, they don't get enough sleep. And this is when your body kind of gets out of their natural body clock, which causes a big problem through on. So basically, if you can't sleep at night, you have these sleeping disorders, then it can cause lots of mental, physical problems, causes to injuries, loss in productivities, the way people act socially. Basically, sleep will affect your everyday life throughout that aspect. So just to give a little bit of background, a little bit of facts behind it. I always felt like some percentages and showing a little bit more statistics, people can really understand how important sleep is. And one of the biggest statistic that I found throughout this application was 90% of people with depression complain about falling asleep, which I find that a good 40% of our population goes through some sort of depression or mental illness, which causes a massive issue and will affect the way you sleep throughout the night. Another thing that really shocked me was how the difference between like how children who can't sleep throughout the night, 89% of them are more likely to develop obesity and 55% in adults. I would also like to go on explaining a little bit more about sleep. So there are different sleeping phases, different sleeping cycles. So I chose to go with this 5-step sleep process. There are lots on the internet and desktop research. So I kind of just went with a few that almost repeated itself and had a bit more, if they had more people that were like doctors or psychologists, I kind of chose those references. So basically REM stage 1 is the stage known as dozing off. So this is the shortest and lightest stage of sleep. REM stage 2 is when you fall into a light sleep, your eye movement stops and body temperature drops. The cycle lasts for about 10 to 30 minutes and will increase throughout the night. REM stage 3 is where you go into a deep stage of sleep, but this is where most of your dreaming takes place throughout the night. Dreaming is super, super important. You have to complete the full sleep cycle to kind of get the best quality night sleep. The reason why dreaming is so important is because it kind of, you go through traumatic experiences or any experience and it kind of will bring you into reliving that without feeling as emotionally invested in it. Another stage of sleep is the final with the REM sleep, which is your deeper sleep. And this is the shorter periods throughout the night that you'll have these, but you should be able to complete the sleep cycle to get a full proper night's sleep around 3 to 5 times during the night. Oops, sorry. Okay, so I did a brief survey. I kind of just did it in person. I went out, spoke to a few friends, spoke to some family members, and I conducted the survey with different people and different target audiences, people with children, different age groups. I just wanted to understand and gain a little bit more insight into what kind of features that they are looking for in a sleeping application. I also wanted to understand people's sleeping habits and what could be potential factors of sleep. So a few questions that I just asked is what features people would like to see in the app. Do they have trouble sleeping at night? Do they have trouble waking up in the morning? I'm sure most of us do, but yeah, so what are the sleeping factors that influence your sleep? Have you ever seen or spoken to a doctor about your sleeping patterns? So just in this part, when I asked the question, have you ever spoken to a doctor about your sleeping patterns, most people said no. And I think this more became of a question where they didn't go to a doctor particularly for a sleeping problem. They would maybe ask them throughout being there if you're sick or you're just going there for a general checkup with your GP, then they would ask them, oh, and I can't sleep that night. So that's why that number's a bit lower. So that was kind of the feedback I got from that. I did an expert interview on a guy named Maximilian Holes. He's actually a really good friend of mine. I do promise his name is Maximilian. So basically, I just wanted to ask him a bit about some advice and how can I approach my app, because I wasn't very sure on which direction I wanted to take. There's so many apps out there with all different types of features, and I just wanted to see what advice he could give me and what I should look for and what I should focus on while designing my app. So the main things that I really focused on was focusing on different types of sleeping disorders, because there's so many sleeping disorders, and there's different types of tips that you could give people and advice you can give people depending on what sleeping disorder they have. Also find ways to keep people off of their phone. I'll explain that when I show you my app. Prep people for bed. Aim on giving advice instead of providing information that causes stress. So I'll explain that while I'm going through my application. And encourage limited naps, no longer than 30 minutes. So that was one element that I have not focused on throughout my app, but the rest I kept into consideration. Cool, so I had some look at some insights and some competitors. I'm sure most of us have heard about Calm. I know I've used it mostly for meditations and bedtime stories. I know my sister uses Sleepiest for her daughter because of the bedtime stories and the soothing music for her child. So I kept some of these things into consideration. So I did not do a persona per se, let's say that. I decided to do a bit more of a journey map. So I took, I've got two people. So one is my mother. She is a 56-year-old woman with, she's got some health problems where she struggles with depression and anxiety, and she's been struggling to sleep a lot at night. She drinks over 8 to 10 cups of coffee a day, and she takes sleeping medication. So she was a good candidate to talk to from this. So I basically wanted to just look at the top here. I just wanted to see her process and her daily, what she does when she gets home. So she will get home, she'll cook dinner, she'll do this, she'll watch TV, she'll fall asleep on the couch, etc., etc. And then I had a look at the way she felt throughout the different processes and everything that she went through. I spoke to her quite a lot about this, but the main reason why I did it like this, we can say it's a bit of a, this is how I did my persona, was I wanted to look at opportunities through the person's journey of that day or their journey before they go to bed. I wanted to see where there were opportunities to add certain features within my application. I also did one for one of my really good friends. He's a single dad to an 18-month-old son. I also used him to kind of see the opportunities there. I wanted to just pick two completely different users, different ages. They have different reasons why they can't sleep at night, and that's kind of what I wanted to have a look at. Cool, so these are just some of my wireframes. There is a lot more. I just didn't add all of them through, but you'll see the process now. Then I did do some split testing with throughout my app, but let me first. Cool, does that apply? Okay, cool. So this is essentially a bit of a prototype. There are a few features for, let's say, a future phase, but I'll get through that. So basically, I wanted to go with a really whimsical storybook kind of feel. I really wanted to play around with my strengths, which is kind of dabbling around and drawing some random things on Illustrator, and I wanted to show that. So I used my process very differently. I wanted to kind of turn the normal login process a little bit different to what I've seen. There were a few apps that I played around through, and I had my mom play around with a few apps, and there was just one process I really liked, and I kind of used it as inspiration through this one. So basically, you'll just be able to see what Counting Sheep can offer you that other applications don't. I have shown the login process, but we're going to start from the beginning and say get started. So yeah, we're going to start with asking someone for their name straight away before they log in. I just thought it was a cool way to kind of do this and get someone a bit more engaged about what the app is about. So we are Emily Davis today, and I went with I'm going to go with her user journey. So Emily Davis, when she first clicks continue and she wants to log in. So I basically chose for her to, I asked this, you want to help understand your needs. So the reason why I did this, if you select this, so Emily Davis wants to use this app because, and then I just put a few reasons why she would like to use this app. The reason why I thought it would be a good idea to kind of do this was if you ever need to add more features in future stages, or you want to get a bit more feedback on what people want in an app, then you can see what they want and you can add it in future development. Cool, so she will then log in. Sana. So I used, as I said, a very whimsical storybook type of feel, and I wanted to play around with the sheep being the mascot of my application. So this will be my loading screens. My loading screens will show some tips on how to improve your sleep, what you can do. I just kind of made it like this. So when you click it, you can see that it will change depending on how long you can load. I also added, so for more information, you can find it in the tips and tricks navigation bar that you'll see. So the one advice that I got from Max was try and keep people off their phone, and you don't want people to engage with the app for too long before they go to sleep. So I made this to be my main screen. So everything will be done here that you need for that specific night. So for example, you'll set your alarm. Cool, what time do you want to wake up in the morning? You also have your burger menu where there's more settings, where you can also connect a smartwatch. So that's the way that you'll be able to get your sleep records, and that's how it's going to track. And then I have my sleep factors. So my sleep factors play quite a big role in my application, is because this is their setup. This is how someone's going to set up the initial starting process. Every night they go to sleep, this is what they do. So Emily is going to select her sleeping factors. So what could possibly, well, what did she do that day that could possibly influence her sleep? So let's say example, she smokes, lots of caffeine, she ate late, or she's got a sleeping disorder, or she could have selected that she has a young child, just not in her own bed, jet lagged, etc., etc. Then I have the sleep radio. So basically what your library is when you make your own custom sounds, which I will be showing you, is when you add your own custom sounds, because some people like to choose what they want to listen to and what is soothing for them or for their children, and you can add it and we'll go to a library. Or you can choose to do meditations or breathing exercises. So how my custom works is you'll have a bar at the top where you'll select what type of sound, like you'll tap on and off, and what types of sound you would like to listen to. So we'll have animals, rain, instruments, and then you can select back on what sounds you want to add to a song. So example, once you've selected your sounds, you'll also be able to adjust the volume of each element. So let's give a bit more of a, like, so you can hear it. Example, you'll select your sounds, you have something like this. Okay, and then you can also select the duration and the timer that you would like the song to play throughout the night. You can go back and you can carry on playing around with it. So ideally, once you've selected everything, you'll start your sleep. You can see what song you're busy playing or what sound that you made. You can pause and play it. And then when you wake up in the morning, you'll click away. Cool. Then I've also added where you can see your tips and tricks. So I decided to go in another bit of advice that I found was to not just look at different types of advice for just sleeping. I looked at different sleeping disorders. So we'll have, I'm just busy looking now through the prototype. It will just be insomnia. And this will be a little bit of insight on what someone can do and a bit of a tip. Okay. Then another thing that I've added was your sleep records. So this was a massive thing that also had a big play with it, is that I didn't want the sleep records to be daily, and every morning you wake up, you can see how you slept that night. So I wanted to look at doing sleep records monthly or weekly, and someone can download it. The reason why I did this is because people who tend to have sleeping disorders become very anxious and almost obsessed over the amount that they sleep throughout the night. So you can only see your sleeping patterns weekly and monthly. But then these durations will only show if you have the whole week. I also added the average for the whole week of sleep. What time did you sleep? Your sleep duration and your average wake up time. Then if you view, because you want a bit more detail from Monday, this is where your sleep factors make full circle as well. As you can see, when you slept, when you woke up, the duration throughout the night, and then the sleep factors will show you. So the reason why I showed the sleep factors was because if you can only see your results, or you only look at it a few days after, or if you do decide to go to a doctor to talk to them about your sleeping patterns, then they can almost see, well, what did you do that day that could have influenced your sleeping patterns and your sleeping results? So that's why it's there. And I thought it would make a really cool thing to almost make the whole app full circle and very personalized to yourself. And you'll also be able to download it and share it as well. So initially in my first presentation, when I presented it to James and Dion and the rest of the team and the CAMs, I had in my menu bar a connect to a doctor, but that I have found out through my feedback that I got that I have a lot to work on and still to research from that section, so I have removed it. But I would like to show you what it did look like when I did split testing. Okay, so back to the presentation. So basically, I did a little bit of split testing on how some, sorry, give me a second. Okay, so then I did some split testing on firstly like a bit of the sign up page. So to move Google and Facebook to the top instead of being at the bottom. My loading screens, essentially I just had the almost like the sheep jumping around in a circle to look like loading, but it was them jumping around. But then I changed it to add a bit of a tip so it can add a bit more information and be a bit more informative. When I did have my connect to doctor section, it was to almost send questions to doctors or to be able to talk to them or to get some advice. Another bit of split testing that I did was my first initial sleep record screen was the one on the left. It was a longer page and I thought, okay, well, this didn't work very well. Nobody really knew what they were looking at. So then I decided to break it up into 2 pages and be a little bit more informative. So I used a lot of my playful around drawing Illustrator skills to kind of create this look. And I have my 4 logo variations at the top, and then I have my mascot where I used him very differently on different pages depending on where you were. When you're in the music section, he was like listening to music. If you were sleeping, then he was there, and I kind of wanted to play around with the storybook feel. So another thing that I would like to use for the app for a reminder for when people should go to sleep is that you'll get push notifications. And then when you receive a push notification, then the person knows, okay, you need to start getting ready for bed. Then you'll get ready for bed now. It gives you about 30 minutes before you start falling asleep so you can complete a full 8 hours of sleep throughout the night. I also designed what it would look like on your smartwatch screens. I just wanted to play around on what that would look like because essentially you would have to connect your smartwatch to collect the data. So the 6 reasons why there is a need for this app is it can help improve sleep, your concentration, your productivity, the way you engage and socialize with other people. It will also help in decrease the risk of heart disease, stroke, depression. It will help improve your immune system, etc. I just wanted to look at why sleep was so important, and if people had almost a tool to help them improve their sleep, then it can help decrease or increase certain factors. So phases for growth within the application. Right now, we have the user side, we have the sleep reports, the custom sides, tips and tricks, sleep factors, and push notifications. But throughout the process, hopefully to flesh out a bit more features and options, the doctor and the use of connectivity and how that process would actually work, and sending and sharing your sleeping patterns to your GP. And then in the future, there will hopefully be a doctor side of the application. So the whole process could make full circle, where you can make appointments, maybe view a doctor's calendar, and or even connect your GP or psychologist to your profile. So that is my sleeping application. Yeah.
Nice. That's very cool. Do you want to ask whether anyone has questions before we move on to the next talk? Maybe we should do that while it's still fresh in everyone's memories. Okay, cool. If anyone has some questions for Melissa about this. Please,
Yes. Oh, sorry.
There's a question in the chat.
Gabriel, I don't know. Hey, he's sitting in the room right next to us now. Is that a question?
Okay, the question is, as a dev, I have so much appreciation. Oh, is it a question?
That's not a question.
It's just a compliment. I see. So Lily did a raise hand thing. Do you have a question?
Oh yeah. Also maybe more comments. But yeah, I think it is really well done. I agree with Gabriel, like really well thought out and considered. Awesome work. And like I said, I really love the sound sample that you included. I think that's awesome. And it's like so rare to see any sort of audio used in an app. So it just gave me this thought in line with trying to minimize people's time on screen, that you could possibly consider carrying that through to the tips and advice. Like, so you could almost like fall asleep to someone in a calm voice telling you how to sleep better. But yeah, just a thought. It's really cool.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I thought the sleep factors were a very cool idea. I like that it kind of forces you to self-reflect a little bit on things that you're doing. And reflection is something that I think we're missing in modern society. So it's cool to have that as a feature in your app. It's not a question, it's just something that stuck out to me. Dory.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, Mel, I just wanted to ask, what was kind of like the hardest part of this project? From start to finish, what would you say was kind of like the toughest part for you?
Okay, so if half the people on this room, apart from the grads, if they knew me in person, one of the hardest things for me is actually presenting. I get very nervous when I present, so that's one. Another thing is also not really having too much background knowledge on UI. On UI, and also using either Sketch or Figma. This was the first thing I've ever made on Figma, so that it was a lot to learn, but it was super fun. Another thing that was pretty difficult was having this topic that literally just never ends when it comes to research, and everything that you read and everyone that you talk to, whatever you find will always change. And that was a big thing that I struggled with, was where do I stop researching and where do I kind of draw the line on what I want to do. That was basically the main issue. I was in my head a lot the first month of designing, because it was a constant loop of trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the app. And then I decided just to sit down and just pick the coolest things and ask the people what they thought and what they wanted. And then I just kind of rolled with it.
Yeah, I'm actually glad like how you managed to like narrow down your research, because it is a very research heavy topic. You did really well in terms of putting like very handy features in your app. I think the things that you put in there people would use, and especially like the sound and especially the timer as well, because you look up and it's like 11 o'clock. So well done. Very, very cool app.
Oh, thank you, Dory.
Cool. Any other questions? Awesome. We're gonna, now that everyone's depressed about how little they sleep and how bad it is for everybody, we're gonna learn a little bit about a fun topic. So we're gonna hand over to Lisa Marie, and she's gonna talk to us about Tinder for dogs. So over to you, Lisa Marie.
Okay. I'm Lisa Marie. I'm a grad, obviously. I'm just gonna jump into my project.
There we go. You can see your screen.
Okay, cool. So I had the brief Tinder for dogs, like James said. When I started my process, I used the design thinking process. So I used the 5 phases, which is empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And then I basically reiterated with these 5 like phases. My first phase was the empathize phase and the research phase. So initially I started doing my research, and I started doing like surveys and talking to people, because I had this idea of creating an app where you can kind of connect people and dog owners with each other, and from there meet other people and like go to dog parks and all of that type of stuff. And when I started researching and started interviewing and all of that, I realized that the gap in the market for an app like that is extremely small and the interest wasn't as big. So I then kind of went in and I searched through apps and tried to find kind of a different idea. And then I came across the idea of creating a dog adoption app, which is now Pals. So throughout this app, research phase, I kind of went to SPCAs and different shelters, and I interviewed, did phone interviews and in-person interviews with a few people to kind of get why people aren't adopting. What's the problem around the adoption? Like, how can this be improved? So I spoke to shelter owners specifically to kind of get their opinion, their view of it, and why did they think this is the problem, and why they think that this app will kind of be useful in solving that problem. I did surveys to kind of see if users would be interested in an app like this and people would actually use an app like this, and kind of to get a little bit more info around like people that have adopted. What were their experiences like? What did they like about the experience? What they didn't like about the experience? And then I also did, there's a plane. I also did data and documentation. I gathered a lot of the application forms of when people adopt a dog. And I went and did a little bit of research about the actual statistics around adopting, which I will share some statistics with you. So at the end of the day, after all of my research, it's a pretty big number. I myself was very shocked. So 78% of dogs don't get adopted, which is it's a lot. So some of the questions that are asked to the shelter owners and to the shelter owners to kind of get more information was just like, why do they think people don't adopt? How can I encourage people to adopt more? And what are the pain points of the actual adoption process? Because throughout my research, I realized that that was a really big issue. It takes a lot of time. So that takes me to what was the main problems that I found and what causes this whole problem of people not adopting. So the first one was time and effort. It does take a lot of time and effort to actually go and adopt. You have to go in multiple times because you have to go in to find the dog. You have to go back to like give all of your documentation. You have to do home visits, which obviously can't be like excluded from the process, but there was a lot of like unnecessary steps to it. The other one was unpleasant experiences. So a lot of people don't have the heart to actually go into the shelter. They want to adopt all of the puppies and not just one. So that was also a major factor. And then circumstances was the last one, which a lot of people said in the service that they would love to adopt, but they actually don't have the environment or the capacity or even like the suitable lifestyle to actually have a dog that wants to go on walks every single day. So I then went on to kind of get a user flow for these three problems and how I would solve these three main problems. This was just the basic user flow that I later on fleshed out a bit more. From here, I started my ideation phase. The color palette I chose was, I wanted the colors to be very like playful. I wanted the app to be very playful and not be as serious, since this is a very serious issue. You still kind of want to make it sophisticated, but you also want people to actually use the app. So I chose the colors orange, blue, and green for my main color scheme. Orange is the more like playful color. Blue kind of is the more loyal color because dogs are very loyal, so you kind of want to bring that in. And then green kind of symbolizes new beginnings. That kind of symbolizes the new beginning of the adopted dog's life. So I went on to kind of draw wireframes. This isn't like my final stage. I did flesh out a lot when I started my actual UI. A lot of features that didn't actually make that much sense later on, after like I did user testing and all of that. There was a lot of things that got added to the whole process. So my main features are for the app and how I wanted the app is I want people to actually find a dog on the app that they would want to adopt. I want them to actually adopt the dog, or I added the feature to sponsor a dog. So this kind of accommodates for the people that want to adopt, but they can't, so they want to help in another way. They can kind of sponsor a dog to get taken care of at the shelter until they get adopted. So that brings us to the final design and prototype. So Pals is a native iOS app, and it allows people to kind of browse pets up for adoption at the shelters that participate in the app. The application provides a unique experience that enables users to not only find their pal, but to sponsor a pal of their choice. Can you see the prototype?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Cool. So I'm going to talk through the prototype, and I'll talk about my user testing and what I added through user testing, and kind of, since this wasn't as heavy research, but it was a lot more like user experience based and like usability and all of that. So I have a splash screen, I have my login screen, which I'm going to go to the sign up screen. So one of the main factors of my app was I wanted to kind of shorten the documentation process. So I wanted the onboarding to kind of capture enough information about the person so that once they want to adopt, the shelters can kind of have enough information from this particular user to see if they would be a viable option for this dog, or even if the dog would be a viable option for them. So yeah, I'm just gonna, so I added I accept the terms and conditions, because since the user's information will be shared with the shelters once they adopt a dog, this is kind of an important step that you would want to add to, like, people need to kind of accept for their information to be shared. They can't just join an app and not approve this. So that brings me to the Find Your Perfect Pal. So the point of this, the kind of goal of the screen is to get information about what type of dog a user wants. So they can leave this blank, which just will mean that the app won't filter the options of dogs around in their area or anything. But for the purpose of the prototype, we're going to click. So basically, you would select what type of dog you want. Do you want a small dog, a large dog, medium? Do you want a puppy? Which in this case, we do want a puppy. I kind of randomized the colors to kind of add the playfulness to it. So there's no like particular thought process in terms of the actual colors that I chose for each tag. So your lifestyle, this is more about the user. So a lot of shelters have these questions of like, do you have a yard? Do you have other dogs? Do you have kids? All of that type of stuff. So I wanted this to kind of be a quick way to get all of that information from the user. They can just select whatever is applicable to them. This is required. They have to select stuff. This will also filter out any dogs that won't match their specific lifestyle at all. So once they do that, the next thing is the location, which basically you put on the location, and this will filter the shelters around you to like a near radius, so that you don't look at dogs that are in Cape Town, but you're in Pretoria, because that does make like home visits and everything very difficult for the shelters. So you would want to have your location on, and you can just share that. So that brings us to the onboarding. The first screen kind of explains how to add a PAL to your adoption list. So you can essentially like a PAL, and that will be added to your PALs list. The next is a sponsor, which is also a button that you like, and it adds it to your sponsor list so that you can later on sponsor that dog if you wanted to. From here, it's a welcome human. And then we start sniffing around. So the home screen is basically essentially going to be cards that are filtered based on what you selected on the onboarding screen. These can be changed on your filter screen if you decide to change your mind. The select a shelter option was actually added after I did user testing. A lot of users wanted to kind of filter to a specific shelter, which was interesting to me because I didn't really think about that. So I added that feature where you can kind of select if you wanted to, and you can clear all of the filters if you wanted to. So yeah, here we have our cards with our different PALs. You can click on the PAL and then kind of see more information about this dog. Like a little story, a backstory. During my surveys, I asked what would people want to see about the dog, and they would all say they would want like a kind of a short description telling you a little bit more about the dog. And yeah, so these tags are then also related to what you may have selected, just so that kind of shows the whole filtering system. And then down below you would see the two buttons. So this one's obviously to add it to your PALs list, and then this one is to add it to your sponsor list. So we're going to pretend that we did both. I'm first going to kind of take you through the adoption process and speak a little bit about that. So, oh, wait, I added these like notifications to kind of indicate that you have added PALs to your list, just so that the user is aware that they did actually add dogs to their list. So from here, you would kind of see the list of dogs that you've added. And from here, you can also edit it. If you decide that Tootsie is no longer on your radar, you don't want Tootsie anymore, you can remove. So the application process is one thing that I think in future can definitely improve. For now, one big issue is, and one problem that I definitely faced, was a lot of shelters are paper-based. They do not use computers. A lot of them, you fill in your form, that form gets put in a file, and that's it. It doesn't, there's no particular structure to it, which is a big issue in terms of the application. So for now, what I did was once you kind of apply and you agree to apply for a dog, you will kind of, all of your information will be sent to that specific shelter, and they will receive your application, and they will contact you if they need further information from you or for your home visit and all of that stuff. So if you say yes, that will kind of bring you back. So another thing that I would also like to add in future is kind of, but this also depends on the whole paper-based system, is kind of have the steps of the application. So there's kind of set steps that happen, like you apply and then you have your home visit, and once you get approved for that, you can kind of adopt your dog. So those are the kind of steps that I would like to kind of have a little bit more of an update to, so that the user kind of uses this application even after they've adopted or applied to adopt, that they can still view this application, well, use the application. So next, I'll take you guys to the sponsor section. So we added Georgie in the beginning to the sponsor list. So he already has a green tick. But you can kind of, I wanted to have the sponsor section to be a little bit more like a shopping experience, where you can kind of browse through dogs, which one are cute, view them, whatever, and add them to your list. So we're going to add Spot. So we added Spot to the list. So then it's kind of like a checkout thing. Right now it's set on $250 per dog that you sponsor. A lot of shelters, that's kind of the standard amount, especially for SPCAs. They usually are like $250. But in future, I think it would be cool to kind of have this be dynamic, so that the user can kind of choose if they want to sponsor a bit more, and not limited to like a specific amount. So from here, you can also remove if you wanted to. I had the idea to kind of integrate PayFast so that it makes the payments a lot easier, so that you don't have to like get banking details and go to your bank, and the user can kind of do everything on the application. You can also see the history of dogs that you've sponsored. So this would obviously indicate the status update. So if the dog was adopted, you would kind of know, and you would be like, oh, okay, cool. But like here we can see Sammy isn't adopted yet. So you would want to add them to the list again. You could do that. So that will kind of take you obviously to PayFast system and then bring you back to the app. And then it will just be like a confirmation screen that you paid, and you will receive your proof of payment. And then it will bring you back to the actual home screen. So just to kind of talk about what I think would be cool to add, and that's one thing that I think would kind of add a little bit more value to the whole app, is a community section where shelters can kind of post updates on dogs, or if they have fundraisers or events, they can also post that, and then that can kind of bring a little bit more engagement within the app and encourage people to actually use the app further. I think that'd be a really cool like feature to add. So yeah, that's basically my app. It's not as intense as a sleeping app, but yeah.
Thank you. It's very cool. I like it. I had a question, I just forgot. So one question that I had was about the sponsorship. So you give kind of a quick rundown when the user starts up about how they're going to use the app, which is either add the dog as a pal or sponsor. But it's not, I don't think it's super clear at that point what sponsoring, like that it is literally just sponsoring a dog at that point. Do you think it would be easy to just add something there that kind of explains it in more detail?
Yes, I think that would be obviously.
Or with that, that's probably like the simplest way to solve that problem, right? It's just to add more info there. I'm not sure.
Yes. No, I actually got that comment because I initially didn't have any explanation, which is kind of bad on my side. But yeah, essentially that would obviously be better to add a little bit more explanation as to what does sponsor mean.
Yeah.
Like where does your money go? I did add like the whole view more on the sponsor screen.
Yeah,
where
that point it was
essentially you
clear.
would click on it and you would kind of be like, you would know what they do with the money. But a lot of shelters also like you sponsor a specific dog, but they don't necessarily use that money
Yeah.
for that specific dog. It's kind of more like a donation. But people tend to like not donate money, but they will sponsor a dog.
Yeah.
So,
So
like
you're
a-
basically using the dog as bait
Yes.
for the shelter to get some money.
Basically.
So they can shamelessly put their most photogenic dogs at the front there.
There's a question to Borgu.
Yeah, Tebogo.
I'm assuming the SPCAs provide images and details regarding the dogs. Yeah, so the idea would be that there would be a shelter side to this app, either like a desktop application or whatever would be easiest for the SPCAs to actually use, and just kind of upload. And that could also solve the whole documentation issue, because if they can kind of have on their side an application where they can like upload the dog, and it can also like track if the dog has been adopted or not adopted, and kind of manage their side as well, that would be ideal. Because then the whole documentation and paper-based problem would also be solved.
So another question I had while you were presenting, when you said that a lot of users said they wanted to specify which shelter they want to adopt from, where do you think that is?
So my one friend said that he volunteers with like certain shelters and he would want to support those shelters. I think since SPCAs are also like, yes, I think they're government organizations, they do have like different management, and people kind of tend to like one SPCA or one shelter a bit more. People also like the shelters like Woodrock, and which are private shelters, a bit more than like SPCAs. I think it's just personal preference more than, yeah. Dory had a question. I don't know if she still has a question.
Dory looked like a deer in headlights.
Sorry, that
just
was,
now.
I think my hand was just up for the whole time. Sorry. I don't know how Zoom works. Lower hand, there's a function, sorry.
Cool. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I think we're going to wrap it up. It's also about time, so makes sense. But yeah, thank you very much to our grads for showing us what you have been working on. As you can see in the comments, everyone is duly impressed. Very nicely done. And nicely done with the presentations as well. So yeah, that's
Thank
it.
you.
That is it for today. Thank you everyone who chimed
Well done,
in.
guys.
I'm going to stop the recording.